Here's how to play Let It Be. When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. We'll just focus on that part to start with, and I'll teach this in 3 increasing levels of difficulty. Now, this lesson will make a lot of sense if you know basic chord notation. If you don't, you're welcome to pick up my 2-page guide to every chord symbol at the piano. That's at my website, pianofluency.com. Let's start with the most basic version, and the chord structure here is super simple. We just have a C chord, a G chord, an A minor chord, and an F chord. And the chord functions here are 1, 5, 6, and 4 in the key of C major. These are the most common chords in pop music. And you can see with how simple this is, why this is such a popular beginner song. The song works great just if you play the chords like that. I'm going to add in root notes in my left hand. And it sounds like this. When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. So you can hear the structure of the song is intact, even though the keys part is quite different from what I played in the main demonstration that we're working up to. And this brings up an important point. You know, with a song like this, you might see different teachers teach this in many different ways. That's not because they don't know how to play the original keys part, or because they're trying to lie to you. They've just rearranged the song to make it more approachable for beginners. And I always like to point out to students that the idea with learning things like chord theory is that you can learn to rearrange songs yourself according to your taste, to your ability level, or different musical situations, like if you're playing in a band. So let's look at some of these arranging devices we can use to get closer to the original keys part. Now, one thing I want to add in for this intermediate level is this walk down. So at the end of the chord progression, we'll walk from the F chord down to C in our left hand. 4, 3, 2, 1. And then I'll follow along with those bass notes in my right hand by going back and forth between this chord, this is an inversion of our F major chord, and this chord, which is our root position C chord. Just like that. So I'm starting on F, and then I'm going back and forth between the two chords to follow along with the rhythm in the left hand. I'm going to make the rest of the right hand part a little bit more streamlined by using inversions for some of the other chords as well. So on the G chord, I'll play first inversion like this. On A minor, I'll also play first inversion. And I'll stick with this second inversion shape on the F major chord. So now we get a part that sounds like this. When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. Another important element of this intermediate version, you should try to use the sustain pedal here. And you just want to use it to connect for the transitions between chords. I'll use the sustain pedal so that as I move to the next chord, we're still hearing the C chord ring out, and then I'll lift the pedal just as I play the next chord. We call that changing the pedal. By the way, this walk down that we just learned, especially if we think of it in numbers, 4, 3, 2, 1, you can use that walk down in a lot of different songs and a lot of different styles of music. And if you're interested in learning more of those kind of foundational skills and applying them across different genres of music, you should become a member at pianofluency.com. All right, we're ready for the most advanced version. Here, I'm going to add octaves in my left hand. I'm also going to do this fun little roll going into the G chord. So I'm rolling up chromatically from finger 4 on the E up to G, and then immediately releasing my hand so that I can reach this octave. And you can hear that I'm starting to add in some extra eighth note rhythm with my left hand because I have these octaves. That's another little detail that's nice. You can walk down from the A to the F. And that's it for our new left-hand part. Our right hand opens up into a 4-note triad shape by doubling the G on top of this C chord down an octave. And now we're still playing a C major chord, but we get 4 notes, and we can easily add some 8th note rhythm by rocking between this shape and our thumb shape. And that's what I mean when I talk about arranging. We've rearranged the C major chord to make a new keys part. It's still the same chord. We can apply that same technique to the G chord. Using our G inversion, we double that G down an octave, and we get a 4-note chord for the G shape. Then here, on the F chord, I'm going to put this melody note on top. You hear this in the recording. We have a melody note that goes from E to D. And if you like, you can analyze this as F major 7, followed by F major 6. But the way to understand it is just that we want to accommodate that moving melody on top of what is already just an F major chord. And in some ways, it makes it easier to play because we don't have to move our hand from the A minor shape. We just stay there for this first F chord, and then we move the top note down for the second. So that's it for our most advanced version. When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. Now, there are just a couple other sections of this song if you want to play the whole song along with the recording, which I highly recommend as a good way to learn. And the only things you have to change in those other sections are the order of the chords. There is one little tag part that uses one other chord. So my recommendation is that you learn those things by checking out a chord chart for this song or by using your ear. And for both of those things, I'll point to my website one more time, pianofluency.com. I love to give students guidance on how to develop those skills, how to approach a chord chart, how to learn songs by ear. And that gives you the kind of freedom to learn any song like this, whatever song you like, in the same way that I learned this song by listening to the recording. With that, my name is Ted with Piano Fluency. Thanks for joining me.